The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
And yes, we're born to be alive. You're listening to Until Now with Rosie Pekar on W4CY Radio. And if you'd like to join the chat, just go across to w4cy.com and click on the link on the right-hand side and you'll be able to ask your questions. Now, today I've got a really exciting guest with me that I'm looking forward to speaking to, but I had to laugh because behind the scenes I was saying, don't worry if, behind the scenes they play my Born to Be Alive a bit, blah, 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 and no sooner do I speak of it than I get it. And it's funny because that's what my card is that I've drawn. Those that have listened for a while know I draw a card every show. It indicates the line that I'm going to go. And today's theme is my attention to it invites the essence of it. So I paid attention to what I didn't want, my song going blah, 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 Born to Be Alive on super speed. And those listening will go, Rosie, you're always on super speed. We have to think faster to keep up with your mouth that's going. Well, luckily we've got Charlie Bezzina, and if I've incorrectly pronounced his name, he'll beat me around the head later and tell me how it should be pronounced. He is a retired detective senior sergeant who's dedicated, now he says half a lifetime, but that's 37 years, folks. Some people are very lucky to even get that as a full lifetime. So it's not half a lifetime. It's quite a fair innings in catching the bad guys and supporting victims of crime, which is what my interest is here today. He continues to be sought for expert media comment in murder investigations because he had 17 years with the Victorian Police Homicide Squad, which, considering all that entails, that's quite a price to pay. He continues to support victims of crime as a private investigator and proactively as a security and risk consultant. And he's also still actively involved in Blue Ribbon, and that commemorates the 159 police officers that have lost their lives on duty. And he tells me he's still got time for his family and his 5 grandchildren, but I actually know quietly on the side that something he doesn't tell me, which that he has a reputation as an all-round really good guy. So welcome to the show, Charlie.
Thanks, Rosie. Good to be here.
And the purpose today that I, really wanted all the listeners to be able to take away, I'm just getting some comments. We didn't hear it in super speed and I didn't hear anything off with the music. Well, good to hear that, guys, because I think Rebel just does it for me and she just does, Born to Be Alive, Born to Be Alive. And as if I don't operate on hyperspeed anyway, you guys know that by now, but I know it's, in lots of parts of the world, it's a different time frame than it is here in Australia, and we're operating getting close to lunch. So, I'm even faster come the afternoon when I've got a bit of wind up. But Charlie, those that are listening know that I come from a law enforcement investigations background, and but nowhere near the length of time that I've got the opportunity to discuss with Charlie today. And it's one of those toughest jobs. Past dinner here. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a few people that will be listening that it's just about their bedtime. So we won't talk too much gory stuff that will give them terrible nightmares, especially with your 17 years in homicide. I'm quite sure you have more than enough tales to tell and lots of books in you. But the one thing, because my purpose today is to move victims out of that status towards being victors. And if we can do that proactively, all the better. But if we can't do it proactively, we can still at least address it reactively. And I know that you've had an exceptionally tough job, as many other police officers all around the world in different parts. And there will be those that love their police, those that hate their police, and every emotion in between. And again, it's sort of like people on the planet. We're not going to love everybody and we're not going to hate everybody. There's that sounds like a book title. One of our listeners has commented. I'm just wondering what comment that was, but that they'll fill me in. So for you, Charlie, and having had such a tough job, what I want to know is, what do you do through that time that helped you to download and de-stress?
Look, I suppose it's always the challenge, and without saying how easy it was, it's the thrill of the chase, really, and you never switch off. And people say, well, how did your family cope and what did you bring home? And I really rarely discussed my cases at home, and it was what it was, and I was away from home quite a lot because we as a homicide squad, we service the state of Victoria. We're nearing 5 million people, and we'd travel all throughout the state doing all suspicious deaths. But it was really the challenge in supporting those victims of crime.
Exactly. And listeners, I just want to agree with the listener that said that sounds like a book title, Victims to Victors. And yes, it is. And it's a theme I really want to bring to the fore, because people can move into a victim status. And that's not just those that are on the receiving end as victims of crime, but also, as you've mentioned, your families and your loved ones, because as one listener's asked, does that break families, the hours of work?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And, I've been lucky. I've nearing on over 40 years marriage, and, I've been lucky to have a great partner in supporting me. And then, as a team leader, a team leader in the homicide squad, in the drug squad, in the armed offender squad, it's supporting your own people because, I'm very, very mindful of having social activities and a life-work balance that, we do get burned out. We've got the post-traumatic stress disorders and the likes. And so you've got two families really as a team leader. You've got your family at home, and I've got my family of detectives. And I had 10 detectives at a homicide squad. So I'm very, very mindful of their living and what they're putting through, and having a young family. As an example, if we have the murders of young babies, then I'm very very mindful of not sending one of my young detectives who has a young baby to do the autopsy, for example. So all these things are going through your mind to support your own people, yourself, and then counselling and supporting the victims, and just expanding on the victims. It's unusual. People sort of look at me strangely because not only do we support the victims of crime and those associated to the victim, we also support the families of the offenders. Because if you can imagine us coming to your door and saying, look, we've just locked up your son for a murder, you're just as much shock as anything else. If they're crooks, well, they don't want to know us, but if there's other good people, we support them also. So they are the extended victims also.
Great. And I'm just going to throw this in there, Charlie, because there's a couple of comments that I'll keep up with as we go, which is one listener's commented, worrying if your family member is going to make it home at night. That's certainly a stress within family environments, but that we have to face. But also Beanie says, "G'day, Charlie and Rosie, great show." So I'll just acknowledge them. I figured there'd be a few of your cronies that might choose to listen in. So I'll just give you the heads up of what stories you tell.
Great.
And exactly, as another listener has commented, wondering if you're going to get that knock on the door saying your loved one got killed in the line of duty. That's quite a stress that, your family, has borne. But something I want to share about you, Charlie, because I've done a little bit of homework. I'm that kind of girl. And you talk about doing, your police family as well as your home, interpersonal family. But that's the one thing that came back resoundingly of why you are known as such a good guy, is because you did take that extra step to be aware that it's not just about yourself and being impacted, that there is beyond yourself. I learnt in the academy that, protect number one was a life skill, and that sounds initially quite selfish. But when you understand the essence of protect number one, it meant protect everyone and everything which is an extension of you that has the opportunity to protect you, which is that family in blue, which is your friends, which is your family, your interpersonal family that you're connected to. It's your business associates. It's anybody that you cross paths with, the motorist that you are angry at that's cut you off. They're in a position to protect you, if you so choose, and deal with it from that fashion. And that's the one thing that has resoundingly come back, is that you've had a high level of respect for all those people that you've interacted with over a lengthy period of time. I only had 8 years in the police force, another 8 years as a private investigator. So I come from a 16-year legal background, but I can tell you that I had enough, and it was my happiest day, the day I got to resign. So After 37 years, was it your happiest or your saddest?
Look, it was my saddest, because there was issues that, unfortunately, times change, and we got a new brigade, be it a new chief commissioner, and he had different ideas about having the old brigade there. And, he often titled as you're a dinosaur, you're this, you're that. But, we had a strong team of detective and senior sergeants leading a team of detectives, and we'd foregone promotion because we loved what we did. We were good at what we did. We got results. We had no complaints. We had high morale, and we were doing a great job. But as things happen, the job changes, new ideas, and we were moved along. And basically, once being moved along, not happy where I was, I decided to retire and said, well, what the hell am I going to do now?
Now, interestingly enough, for those that don't think crime can happen to you, well, think again. I'm just going to give you some Australian statistics. So this is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, that in 2014, kidnapping had been at a 5-year low, and our 5-year low is roughly 2.3 persons per 100,000. I don't know where they got the 0.3 person from, but that's not the kidnapping one that you want to find. But between 2015 and 2016, the number of victims increased nationally in every single category. That's homicides, that's kidnapping, that's sexual assaults, that's robbery, that's blackmail and extortions, vehicle thefts, break-and-enters, and thefts against the persons. So those robberies that were on the rise, that's the first time in 6 years, with armed robbery up 7%. Sexual assaults, that they've reached a 7-year high, up from 21,948 to 23,052 victims. And motor vehicle theft is the highest it's ever been since 2012. Oh, and those armed robberies, incidentally, within Victoria, instead of being up 7%, is up 22%.
Yeah.
And homicides up 9%, and that 9% translates to 36 victims. Now, when we talk statistics, it almost sounds very cold, but when we talk human beings, that's 36 knocks on the door that people are getting messages of someone near and dear to them that through no fault of their own are never going to be seen again. That to me is unacceptable. So what did you see that through your career in the 37 years, such a vast increase or decrease? Or?
Yeah, look, very much so. Having joined Victoria Police in 1972 as a fresh-faced 17-year-old, and then retired all those years later, I've just seen, when I started, we worked on our own. There was respect for the law. There was respect for the police officer. And as time went on, and the police, in fact, lost the fear factor. And that respect went, the fear factor went, and basically complaints against police were rising. The hierarchy and the politicians were reacting to it. The minority groups, the civil libertarians, were getting stronger and stronger. And basically, the court justice system wasn't delivering the penalties that they should be delivering and answering the expectations of the community. So, look, it's been an ever-increasing, a figure in relation to crime, which is increasing, which is very, very worrying.
And speaking globally, because I travel a lot between the US and Australia, and I'm, quite well associated with a lot of US police And the massive difference that I see between those two countries is our judiciary system, because over here, as we see, and a lot of police get defeated and tired and worn out because they're chasing the same crooks again and again, and it takes such a high level of evidence to actually bring them before the court with a brief decent enough to establish prima facie case or enough evidence that they can answer the charges, only to see them walk back out again saying, well, don't do that again and be of good behaviour. And after 6-7 times of that occurring, the police are thinking, why should we bother putting our lives on the line and everything at risk when it's not followed through? Whereas in the US, if they had from the first time, they would have been incarcerated and slapped inside straight away to say that's not acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a deterrent effect. I was having a chat on a radio program here last week in relation to what's big in Victoria currently is the introduction of safe injecting rooms for our drug addicts. And, it's the great public debate that's absolutely bringing along. And my issue was, and my response to that was, well, having spent 3 years in the drug squad, I worked undercover buying drugs and the likes, and got very, very frustrated in the whole system of not getting up the tree. And basically it's the old adage, you cut the head of the snake off and the body dies. And we've got, our death rate is, I think last year was about 190 have died from illicit drug use and the likes, but they're not tackling the importation. They're not tackling the commercial quantity traffickers and importers, and that carries life imprisonment. And interestingly enough, our sentence advisory unit here in Victoria has done their research, and it comes back that major drug traffickers of commercial quantity carries life imprisonment, but the average sentence is 8 years and 6 months. So if you don't, we're attending to the cause and the effect, but let's start locking these people up and show them that you import these drugs in, it's going to cause the deaths and the heartaches and everything else that comes with it, and the amount of money that's spent on it globally and nationally. You've got to start getting fair income like the USA are, and that's what we really need in this state.
Exactly. And it's not just the importation, obviously, it's the manufacture and distribution within our own country in-house. That because, as you said, 8 years, if they look at that as I'm a business person, that I go, okay, well, I'm going to get 1.2 million per year. 8 years, is that worth it? Yeah, some make that as a calculated decision. But at the same token, we're dealing with lots of people that are thugs, that are violent offenders, that, you've seen within crime over a lengthy period of time. My question to you is going to be, do you see it as being more organised and tactical and strategic, or you see it as still being on the increase for impulsive and explosive violence?
Well, I think it's both, really. It's both, because they are getting more sophisticated. You look at the great network that you have on social media and the likes, and the distance that they can travel. Unlike America, we're, I suppose, a bit different to America in the fact that, sure, we've got 6 states in Australia, but we're all got different laws. Extradition is there from different states and the likes, but, we're a small enough country to be able to amalgamate and have the one law, but we just have different laws and different penalties in different areas. But we're slowly getting there, and the involvement of the politicians, where the court system is letting the people down. And I'm a great adage that you cannot rehabilitate career criminals. They are what they are. That a lot of the politicians now are mandating sentences. Our manslaughter charge here in Victoria carries 20 years imprisonment. Well, in all my time of charging people for murder and manslaughter, the average sentence is basically, I suppose, 5 to 6 years. And we had what they call now the coward punch. Now, the coward punch in New South Wales and Victoria, coward punch is where someone is standing there and someone comes from behind, hits them once, they hit their head on the ground and they die. Well, it's now been mandated in Victoria that they now face 10 years imprisonment, and so it should be. And they changed the law significantly from saying, okay, Precedent says you've got to give them 5 years. Now the politicians say no to the judges, and the judges, you must give them 10 years. And let's see how that goes.
But I guess too, it's also, the challenge is culturally we have an acceptable level that is helped by the media, by the publicity and the movies and the Hollywood spin of, all things. I've got a 9-year-old son, and my 9-year-old son, he asked permission for certain games, and they're gangster themed games. And I'm like, honey, what is this terminology of badass, as if badass is cool? And it's like, no, honey, they're thugs. They are perpetrators that hide in the shadows, or they hang out in groups because they're bullies, and they'd be cowards on their own without their gangs around them. They're psychos that want to hide in amongst, being the cool guy by day and the not so cool guy by night. And I talk in schools, all around Australia, doing anti-bullying campaigns. And the one thing I say to them, I spoke in Broadmeadows there in Melbourne, and I was the first female that they brought in to speak, because I'd only had men speak before, because they didn't think the boys at Broady would want to hear this chick. At the end of it, they booked the same chick for their Christmas do, because I was simply blunt. And I said, you kids here that think it's cool to hang out together, to start off doing petty things, and those petty things might be throwing rocks from overhead passes. It might be, stealing a motor vehicle. It might be, something that they almost see as victimless, because they don't see the end result of their actions, though we know certainly it's not victimless. And, they hang around and they egg each other on and spur to go a little bit further, or they meet the wrong element that can utilise what they're doing so that they don't get busted. And I said, did anyone ever sit here at school and go, gee, I can't wait till I get out of school and I'm in jail for 5 years for armed robbery? It's like, no one ever made that plan to end up in prison, yet our prisons are chock-a-block and bursting at the seams. So Absolutely. I'd rather see them actually have a direction, have a point of focus, knowing that, where you've been at up until this point is not set in stone. And, on that tone, I want to tell you a little story about these two drug dealers. They were arrested and appeared before a judge for trial, and both men are convicted. But the judge agrees to suspend their sentences if, as a community service, they agree to speak to youngsters and hopefully successfully steer them away from drugs. So they both accept this and report back to the judge 1 week later. The judge asked the first man, how successful were you getting kids off drugs? And the first man replies, I did very well. I stopped 36 kids from doing drugs, Your Honour. And the judge is impressed. Wow, that's great. How did you manage that? Well, replied the first man, I drew 2 circles, one big and one little. I pointed to the big one and said, this is your brain before drugs. Then I pointed to the little one and said, this is your brain after drugs. Well, said the judge, that's simple but effective. And that's what I tell my son too, is that, you mess with that stuff, you're never going to be the same again, and you don't get that second chance. So the judge then asked the second man how he did. And the second man says, I got 100 kids off drugs, Your Honour. Really? Said the judge. That's amazing. How did you do it? And don't know whether you've heard this before. Well, said the second guy, I drew 2 circles just like the other guy did. So he drew a big circle and a small circle. But I pointed at the small circle first and said, this is your butt before you go into prison. And I guess you can work out what the big circle's about. So I thought it's that personal incentive plan that we need to inspire our kids today, that to be aware that there's always consequences to actions. Yeah, we've got a few listeners laughing. But that's the real deal. People want a movie style and restylize this gangster mode instead of, keeping it real. It's not pretty. It's nice. It's a nasty, nasty world. So if you had words of advice to give that you've obviously given to your children from what you've seen, that they've gone on successfully having more and you've got grandchildren, what would those words of advice be?
Look, I, like yourself, just to prelude it, I also speak at schools and leadership programs and that type of thing, and I personalise it. And basically, in personalising it, I just say it's all good and well, the kids make these decisions, but I put them on top of a pyramid. So they're at the apex of the triangle or the pyramid, and I said they very, very rarely look behind them. and behind them stands their family, and behind them stands their sporting group, behind them stands their other friends and close relatives, etc., etc. And I say to them, the actions that you do has a ripple effect on all your family. And I said, do you want to be the one that's going to commit an offence or be involved in drugs or whatever it may well be because you want to be part of the group and part of the peer group pressure and the likes, and you want to be a hero like these guys and don't be belittled? But when you get the police car coming to your mum and dad's home, when your father or your mother has to ring up work and give some excuse to their boss to say, I can't come in for work today because I'm not feeling too well, when in actual fact they've got to go with you to the police station to be in the presence of the police officer. How do you think that and I say to the kids, how do you think your parents feel about that? How do you think your neighbours would feel about seeing this police car in front of your mum and dad's home? You have now brought down your whole family empire in relation to how they are. They are good people, and by your one silly wrong decision in whatever you've done, have brought all that down, everything that they've worked for, everything that they stand for, and their reputation, their credibility. And when these kids then go for a job, I say in this day and age, certainly here in Australia, the employers are doing police checks. And something you did as a 14-year-old, you'll always regret for the rest of your life. And the employer's not going to say to you, look, you didn't get this job because when you're a 14-year-old, you did A, B, C, we're committing this crime. All they'll say to you is, look, you just didn't have enough experience, and then you'll get that knockback. You then get the next knockback, and you get the next knockback. And the young kid then starts blaming everybody else except the person in the mirror. So what you do today is a long-term life effect on how your rest of your life will then develop.
Exactly. That's what I say to them. You're planting the seeds. So, if you're planting tomato seeds, you'll only get tomato plants. There's no other plants that are popping up in place of those tomatoes. So, and as some listeners has commented, may I use that, please? Yes, you most certainly. And this can follow you around. Yes, it stays with you for life. And it is, as another has commented, the domino effect. So that's why if you want to be, successful in life, you've got to plant those seeds of the direction that you plan to head, not find out that life has got a different plan for you by those that you hang around and associate with. Because these crimes of incrimination and getting caught up with those around is where, you and I would have seen a lot of good people go down. Exactly.
But then, the amount of crooks that I've interviewed, and yourself also, that they've sat there, and these are supposed to be good crooks, they're career criminals, and I say they sit in the corner of the interview room with their head in their hands, and that magic word, like all of us, children upwards, is regret. Once you regret something, you never take it back. You can never take back the spoken word when you start abusing someone or bullying someone. You can never take the action. If you then strike someone or assault someone, you can never take that back, and you can be as sorry as you like and regret all you like, but it's been done and you never take it back. That's why you've got to engage the brain before anything else and look at the repercussions. It's the old Newton's law, cause and effect. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So if I do this, if I throw this rock, if I drop this brick off this overpass, what's going to happen? Oh, it could kill someone. That might have been my father driving or my mum driving that car and have killed them. That's what they've got to start thinking. If I do this, what is going to be the long-term effect? And unfortunately, the younger ones, even the older generation, they don't. They just react, and all of a sudden regret then sets in, all too late.
And sadly, that's the attachment to mine. It's that division we have, be it, within our own families, within our own neighbourhoods, within our own cultures, within our own nations, that we go, this is mine, so I just look after mine. But being aware that the pain that you feel in losing something or a loved one being so harmed or damaged is the same that another feels, but that's where they disassociate and go, oh, it's not my problem. Once we start to understand that this is our problem, this belongs to all of us, then we'll actually develop the true leadership, which is what I say to my son, because, as one listener said, that is a bad thing when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and another's commented, it's hard to prove innocence. Well, this is what I say to my son. He hangs around a kid that's his best buddy. Now, this kid, God love him, is more on the side that, he's running a little bit the wrong side of the tracks. And I've caught him out a couple of times, and I'm pretty strong and forthright and direct when I come forward. So I've said to my son, because he said, what do I do, Mum? Because I'm around him, and he's when he's doing stuff that's wrong. And I said, well, you've got two choices. I said, the first choice is to pull him up and say what you're doing is wrong, and this is what it's going to lead to, because at least my son has been taught to look and understand that there are consequences and actions, so we can see things before they happen. So I said, you've got the choice. You can pull him up and say, this is wrong and don't do it. And if he says, bad luck, I'm still doing it, then your next choice is walk away. I said, because if you're present with him when he's still doing it, you're as guilty as if you were the one doing it yourself. So that answers that it's hard to prove innocence, because you have guilt by association. So part of becoming a leader is being able to say, no, this is my area. Go back to circles. This circle is precious to me, and I want to keep it with, those that are important and valued, and follow the same, I guess, my own moral compass that I'm, dictating as my true north, as my direction towards the things I want. Because otherwise, if you're caught, by association, which is how people get caught up, they get incriminated in it, and then they've got to keep their mouths shut, and then they've got to do, favors, and, it just builds one upon the other. And before you know it, a life of crime is already been pre-paved. So I want to ask you,
Yep.
Because there will be those police that are listening, that you've had 37 years and you've come out the other end, not jaded, and a police officer that maintains the respect of his troops and has maintained, the love and the relationship within your family. What advice would you give to the young Charlie?
The young Charlie, what, in growing up, or?
Within that career of policing, and if there's anything you look back on that you see that if I'd known that then, the benefit of all those years.
I think the fact that for the whole 37 years I looked at every day of going to work, I was happy in what I was doing, because it's the old story, you're part of the solution, because people think, as police, we care. Police officers care because they live in the community. They want to improve the community. You just don't take the batteries out of a police officer, put them in a cupboard to the next day and put the batteries back in again. They've got some involvement, so they really care in relation to it. But, it's being happy in doing what you're doing. The frustrations do set in, and that was a lot that affected my career, was from the hierarchy and not having the support from the bosses, because they got more political about being criticised by the minority groups, instead of saying, guys, okay, I know you've got a difficult job, you make the decision, you're a Johnny on the spot, I'm not there, but you know what, whatever the decision you make, I'll support you. And we started losing that quite considerably over here over the years. And that was really frustrating and demoralising, because you then felt you were alone. You didn't have a senior officer having your back. We started losing the old factory floor police officer that grew up through the ranks. We started getting people from outside the Victoria Police to run things, and that's eventually ended up in disaster in a number of ways. So look, it's a matter of loving what you do, being part of the solution, and putting up with the frustrations of not having the support from the hierarchy. But you can go home, and even when you get the acquittals, and you go to court, you put all this time in. Personally, and your team knows, you put 120% in that particular investigation, and and the families know that, the victims of crime know that, and often whilst we get despondent, we go and have a beer with the victims of crime, with the families, and they say, Charlie, you guys did a fantastic job, because you build up such a relationship with these people, and they know what you've gone through. But unfortunately, the good people in our society are the silent majority.
Yeah. So the three musts that I take away from there, which yours has come from a career in policing, but it's equally relevant to any individual, is that to be happy in what you do, to stay solution focused, so have that end point in mind of what it is that you're working towards, whatever it is, and to give it your all. And that would be the three strategies for success in absolutely anything you're choosing to do within your own life, be it even as simple as weight loss, as simple as, hunting for a job, or, to move forward after some devastation. So since I'm on that moving forward, those that have been victims, and again, you work in an environment today proactively in order to mitigate that, what if again, I'm going to use the magical three strategies would you give to people to minimise their chances of becoming victims of crime?
Well, look, I'm very big on, and I say to all the groups that I speak to, is being aware of your surroundings. Get off your phone, get off your tablets, or get off everything else. When you're in the public domain, you present yourself, and it's an unfortunate world. People say to me, well, hang on, I can do as I please. I can walk down the street. Why shouldn't I be able to walk down the street as any person, male or female, and at 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night? Well, you should. But unfortunately, we live in a society that we've got predators out there. And having predators out there, it's unfortunate that we've got to be mindful of our surroundings. And then, looking at people. And then, and people will know that if they're walking along and they see something that doesn't quite fit right, or they'll know there's a sixth sense of saying, you know what, that guy looks a bit sus to me. I'm not happy with him. I'm going to go this way, or I'm going to ring the police, ring our 000 number, or the equivalent of 911. But, being mindful of your surroundings, being part of the solution. If there's something that's happening, ring the police. Let them, we often make media releases and saying we need the public's assistance. There's so few of police, but many of the community out there. They are the eyes and ears of the Victoria Police in reporting crime. These crooks, these bad guys live next door to somebody. So basically, it's being part of that solution and helping out the police. You're not going to be ridiculed. Make a call. You can do it anonymously and say, you know what, there's a guy down the road, I think ABC, and then let the police deal with it. It's being part of that. So if anything does happen, it's not on your conscience, and that you're part of that solution and being part and helping. And we've all got to be on the same wavelength. Our neighbourhood, looking out for each other, and all this type of thing. It's a fact that bad guys will always be there, but I think the good will always override that, and we've got to bandy together and look and support each other.
And I think that's really important to take note of, is that it really is the 1%ers. It's like I spoke on a previous program talking about, within the prison system, they focused on the psychos, and they said, yep, the psychos are only 1% of the population, but not in the prison system. They're the cause of over 50% of the crime. So again, our 1%ers here that are the cause of so much of this crime is what the majority of us that, can take action about. And it's that old saying, that bad things happen because good people do or say nothing. If we start to actually unite and stand up, these bad people don't have a safe, they're looking over their shoulder, spending a life like that anyway. So, let's make them have, what's that movie where the head spins around nonstop? I want them to have one of those flip-top heads that's on permanent revolver mode.
Yeah.
So they can never sleep easy.
But in saying that also, it's a system that's got to support the good people. I really get despondent the way witnesses are treated at trials, murder trials over here. A garden variety murder over here would last 3 to 4 weeks. And, the justice system expects these good citizens, these witnesses, to jump at their command. And, and you try and sort of balance that and say, and I used to say to a lot of these prosecutors, to say, understand this, these witnesses that I've been speaking to, these witnesses that I've got a relationship with that you've never seen or spoken to, they have got a life. They've got a living they've got to earn. Sure, we're going to do our best to work around it, but they need your support. We go to our Supreme Court here in Victoria, and it's a cold, bluestone old place built in the 1800s, and there is no real good facilities to look after our witnesses. And even when they lose money in leaving work, the reimbursement for loss of wages and that type of thing, it just isn't good enough. And how often have I heard these good people, these witnesses that want to be part of the solution, and when they go through the justice system, and they'll say to me, Charlie, look, the way I was treated, I'm not going to get involved ever again. And we lose so many. So it's so important that the whole justice system, the legal system, the political landscape has got to be out there supporting the people that actually help the police.
And I think that's the beauty of social media today, is because it's no longer reliant and dependent on the media voices that was the local newspapers or the local radio that could be in someone's pocket or otherwise, that printed what they wanted to print or how they wanted to print. Now you can't control the social media to that extent. So, you know, these people with their own petitions that are forcing statutes to change, that are forcing amendments to be made, that are highlighting the massive gaps that exist in the system. And again, I guess too, within, you know, once they are incarcerated, you know, what actual hope there is for people to be turned around and no longer be that career criminal, to actually be supported and enhanced in order to, you know, create not only for themselves, but those that they impact and interact with, the opportunity to make better choices.
Yeah, well, that's right.
I guess we've got quite a way to go.
Oh, I think we have, and it's unfortunate, the whole, you know, our jail system, how it works. You've got, you know, what we call social offenders, traffic offenders, the ones that drive without a license or drive whilst intoxicated with alcohol or drugs, and it might well be the case that they're thrown in with career criminals. And then, you know, we just compound the situation. You know, we should do a lot of things, and because our jails are so full, that's why they introduced community-based orders, suspended sentences and the likes. And the whole justice system is there to protect the innocent, but unfortunately in protecting the innocent, it also protects the guilty. But what you're saying is exactly right. Of how do we identify, you know, if there's a career criminal, how do we then pull this person out of the rut that they're in, then give them some support? You know, it takes money. We'll try and support them housing. We'll try and support them work-wise, but they've got to be willing to be part of that.
Exactly. I always like that, you know, I say, you know, powerful people are those that recognise that they have choices. You know, the ones that aren't powerful don't realise that. So for our listeners, in order to, you know, move from victim to victor and to mitigate any opportunity to become a victim, remain alert and aware and quick to identify within your own environment what is norm and what's not so normal, and then be able to activate, you know, a different path, or ask for help or assistance, and be able to assess that situation. You know, is this still part of the ordinary, or is it extraordinary in not a good way? If it's extraordinary in not a good way, raise that alarm, report it, reveal it. You know, don't help conceal it. You know, we're all in this together. So the more that we become mindful in our everyday, yes, it is easier said than done, but it's what I teach my son, you know, because he's young, he's moving out in the world, and I live in an environment that is affected by a high level of drug influence. And those people under the influence of drugs aren't caring or thinking about whether, you know, my son comes home intact in the way he left, you know, in the morning to school, but I am. So, and I put that responsibility now onto him, that, honey, you have to be aware in your environment. If your environment doesn't feel good to you, and we've all got that sixth sense, act on it. And when you act on it, you know, report it, reveal it, you know, don't let it stay hidden, because crooks want to stay hidden, you know. So the more that we can put some light on it and make it difficult and harder to be a crook, it's not the better option then. You know, their better option is to be, you know, one of the good guys.
No, very much so, and you're spot on what you say. And if I can just divert just slightly from what we were speaking about earlier, with police officers and the likes, and it's an unfortunate state of situation when we start talking about how the police officers react and how they look after each other. And it's very mindful of, and how I used to run my teams also, it's very mindful of, because you're dealing with this stuff all the time, and you know, it's hard to disassociate yourself emotionally, because you look at a young 15-year-old and you say, you know what, that might be my son or my grandson or my nephew or my niece and the like. So you're very mindful of then, but looking after yourselves and the people around you, and just even tapping one of your co-workers on the shoulder, and you'll know when something's different, and because without the good people like us doing the job that we are doing to make the community a safer place to be, if our wheels start falling off, well, where are we going to be in society? So we really need to look after ourselves in all emergency services. your fire brigade, your ambulance and the likes, and other emergency service support workers. It's just asking those little magic questions. Are you okay? And then looking at anything that might change in their habit. You might say, geez, that's a bit odd. Take someone aside and just say, let's go and have a coffee, and be mindful of that, because we suffer in silence, and coppers want to be the tough guys and they don't want to put up their hand. But it's up to the ones that are around them to identify any changes in them. And that's why I was very mindful of, I wanted to go out with my team and take out the partners. So we'd go out as a group, as a team, with all the partners, because when we go away, when we'd be involved in these major investigations, and the fear factor would be setting in with the partners of saying, will their partner come home? They know that they're not sitting alone waiting for their partner. They know that Charlie's wife is sitting there, that Brian's wife and her husband is doing this and this type of thing. So it all becomes a support mechanism. So whilst we get involved in supporting the victims out there, that we also got to be very mindful as officers and anyone involved in the emergency service support area is to support ourselves also.
Yes, very important. And that's for, whether you're a first responder or what I call a first responder in the home, you need to be able to look after yourself, and that's with, what you've got to back you up. And it does, as a listener has commented, it goes back to thinking before action. Most definitely, the more we can raise awareness and make this a deliberate conversation, even better. And as Beanie has commented for you, Charlie, please put in for the Chief Commissioner's job next year.
I've had that a couple of times.
I think there'll be a few batting for your support. So what are you doing today? We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll close up so that those that want to get in contact with you, where they can go to.
Oh, well, look, it's a matter of, I'm a bit elusive of being in contact. I'm on LinkedIn, and it's about the strength of it. I stay off social media because we're very mindful. I'm very mindful of my privacy and my own safety, and because I've been involved with so many different bad guys over the years. But basically,
exactly. But in your professional capacity, what is it you're specialising in today that people might seek you out for?
Oh, well, look, I'm doing private investigations. I actually tied up with two high-profile past investigations in relation to possibly unsafe convictions in relation to murders. So we're looking at that with a group of people. And plus I'm doing security assessments on different businesses, and then risk management of saying, look, Charlie, what are our risks? What can you tell us about it? I'm hopefully doing a talk very soon to a lot of businesses of saying, well, what can we do to improve our security given our crime rate? So anything along those lines, that's my expertise, and that's what I bring to the table about, I've been there and done that, and can speak with some authority in relation to how the bad guys think.
Exactly. And for average Joe Blow that wants to keep themselves safe in their home space?
Yeah, well, I'm very big on CCTV cameras, whilst you can't measure something that doesn't happen. And crooks, like you said earlier, I think, they don't want to be identified. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. So they'll see a camera and move on. You don't want to live in a fortification with bars on your windows. Have the lighting there and get to know your neighbours. Let's get a whole unit together and start reporting things to the police and ringing that emergency number every time. If you're not happy and you want police attendance, ring that emergency number and let them know that you are mindful of what's happening around you in the community and making it as all of us.
Exactly. So don't live in fear, live fully, but remain aware, alert and report. So you've been listening to Rosie Pekar on Until Now. My guest today has been Charlie Bezzina, and I'm really grateful for his time here today. And if you want any more inspiration and motivation, go over to www.kickbuttwith1t.com.au, and there's plenty more there for you. So until next week, remember those crooks, there's a lot of dumb ones out there too. So I'll just close on one story of where this victim's jewellery was missing and the electronics were gone and a window was smashed, and she was hysterical when the police officer showed up. And then her French-speaking father called, and she spoke in French over the phone to her father saying it was all a scam just to get the insurance money. Well, luckily for her, or unluckily, what she didn't suspect was that the officer actually spoke 6 languages, of which French was actually one of them as well. So thank goodness that the crooks are not as smart as they like to think they are. And thank you so much, Charlie. And I look forward to talking to everyone else next week.
Pleasure.